hi there out there in social media world too. It's kind of fun that we're going to talk about the holiday stuff. And it's super cold out, so we can all just pretend that it's winter. Because it's going to be any moment, going to be winter. So my topic for tonight is the holiday tales of long ago. And I have to say it was one of the funnest topics to research because the timeline is Esther, I can't see you. Can you move over a little? So yeah, that's good. Thank you. There we go. I just want to be able to have some eye contact.
And Lynn's watching from home.
Oh, hi, Lynn.
She might have a cold.
Oh, good that you stayed home. No bringing your colds here. But it was a really fun topic to research. Like, I know the things I know, but then to see the timeline was very, very startling. And you'll see what I mean when I start chatting. So this time of the year, that's all right, honey. 12,000 years ago, they started to understand the longest night of the year and honored that time. Who knows what they called it and what it was happening then. But we look at Stonehenge, all Newgrange, all these stone circles, they all are in alignment with the solstices or the equinoxes, right? So they were aware that something really powerful was happening. And so on the 21st or around that date every year, it is the longest night of the year. Hi, Bridget. Welcome. I just am starting.
Sorry, I'm late.
No, it's okay. Literally, really just starting. If you want, there's also hot mulled cider down.
Oh, okay.
So
Thank you.
So I'm just starting to talk about solstice. And so they were aware. I mean, they had to be aware. I mean, they were connected to everything. They were connected to the cycles, the animals, and all that was going on. So the longest night of the year was significant to them. And so as time moves marching forward and we get to be slightly more agricultural and less nomadic, and we start to have villages and we start to have community, this is all pre-Christian, right? Pre-Jesus happening. Winters, we don't understand winter. Because we live at a time where we flick a switch on, we have light, we have heat, we have electric blankets, we have slippers, we have all the things we need to be totally comfortable. But when you think about the Nordic lands, like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, Greenland, all those places, it's dark for months. I was in Iceland in August years ago, and it was 24 hours of daylight, and that is really freaky on the body. Like it's to wear sunglasses at night. I was like, what's happening? So just the flip side of that is it's dark. 3 or 4 hours of light is all they're going to get. Like the sun doesn't even come above the horizon, so you get that very light, minimal light. How hard was life for them, right? So, come the longest night of the year, it was clear after that a little bit more light was happening. So what was happening for the communities is they started celebrations. That if they had made it that far, they were going to survive. Right? They felt like, hurrah, we have made it to midwinter. And we have enough stores. They could tell we have enough stores to get through. They were also at that time slaughtering the animals that they did not have enough food to feed. So they were having huge feasts. Mm-hmm. And everyone would come together. It was a big community event. And so that's how it starts, right? It's a slow start. It's about cold. It's about surviving. It's about community. It's about how do we stay connected. So I'm going to talk about the Nordic people first, because the traditions really, a lot of them start there with our Viking ancestors. Because they live in lands that are much wilder than most of Europe also. I mean, they still have their wild, but again, we're in this rustic part of the world. One of the things they notice is that evergreen trees are more powerful than the winter. Right? Because all the other trees lose their leaves and die back. But the evergreens, they stand tall and proud against the winter cold. So there's something really, really magical about evergreens to them. And they begin, as this little piece of green pokes me, they begin to ornament and decorate with the evergreens. They decorate, and then, you know, the pagan, when it becomes actually pagan, when there's actually a term for it, because now there's Christians, right? And then there's the others. So when they become the others, things start to get actually written down, and we have more an account of things. So they decorate from the front doors in, all right? Bringing in the light, and then it protects them. They feel that the evergreens, because they are so powerful, they will protect them from the winters. Right? So they decorate all with the evergreens. The lights on our tree, and so that's how come we have a Christmas tree. That's where that all started. And that just followed through, like these things that had nothing to do with like our sense of Christmas, right? So it was about protecting. It's about bringing in the light. When they were hunting, how they honored the pine trees is that when they had their kill, so this is a little kind of gory, but when they had their kill, they took all the insides out, right? So if you've ever hunted, you know you don't want to drag all of that shit out of the woods. You're just dragging the meat. And so you discard everything, but what they would do is they would decorate the evergreen trees with the insides. Two things. They were honoring them, thanking them for their kill, thanking them for protecting them, feeding them, and then it was going to be food for the animals. So they actually decorated and draped these bloody things over evergreens, and that's how we started decorating our trees. Is then when we were more civilized, in order to honor your tree, you draped things on it, not bloody. So that's how the draping started. But it was about hunting and honoring both their kill and the trees. So that's the evergreen. Their feasts were incredibly opulent, and that follows through for another 1,000 years. Opulent festivals, feasts that you can't, giant feasts, and some of the accounts of them are really wild. But it was a way for the wealthy to feed everyone. The masters fed everybody, and the servants didn't have to wait on them. The servants got fed. The servants got taken care of. And in the Nordic tradition, so they, you know, I love the drinking horns. They hollowed out a new horn every year, and it was so that everyone drank from the horn, because we were all equal and you were all connected together. And that was the way that they showed that, is that they drank from the same cup. They drank from the same horn. The Yule log, they started really all the traditions that we like. The Yule log, they would cut down a whole tree, and this tree would be what they used the whole, however many days it was. And they just kept pushing the tree into the fire. You know, when that became not functional, the Yule log was created. And it wasn't a cake. No cake Yule logs. And then, so what I hear today, the lore about the Yule log is, and it wasn't originally this way, but from the Middle Ages when pagans were doing Beltane. Fast forward, hundreds of years, Beltane, the maypole that they cut down, becomes the Yule log. They cut from the Beltane pole, the maypole, to make your Yule log. But that's not how it originally started. It was just a giant tree. Kind of like, maybe I like to think of it as that they were looking like, how New York looks for the perfect tree. That's what they were doing, the perfect fallen tree for their Yule log, their Yule tree. Mistletoe finds its way into the Nordic tradition. So in that tradition, you've got Odin, Freya, Frigg, Thor, Baldur, all those characters. That was very much part of their lives. And Baldur, who is Frigg's son. So Frigg is married to Odin. And she has children, Freya, Baldur, who else? Somebody else. I don't care about them right now. It was about Baldur. She had 2 boys that are murdered. Baldur is poisoned by mistletoe. She cried so much. Her tears are the white on the mistletoe. Her tears caused his resurrection. And from that day forward, mistletoe became a very sacred herb to the Nordic people. And Frigg declares that if you stand under mistletoe, no violence will come to you because it had resurrected her son Baldur. So that's the story about mistletoe. And then it just keeps, then it evolves to, standing under it and you'll have forever love or whatever the current story is. But it does start off that it's because it's poisonous and it can kill you. And now the turnaround is that I've cried enough for you to be saved. Very interesting, right? Mm-hmm. Drinking horns, you like mistletoe, evergreens. All right, so that's what happens in the Nordic area. It's the first flying man. Like, we have Santa flying in his sled. Uh-huh. In the winter, now even here, if you're outside on a really stormy, cold night, the wind through the trees is a really interesting sound, right? And if you're in the woods, if you imagine being in Iceland, where there's nothing but wild, and you hear this wind through the trees, they believed it was Odin on his horses, and he had that horse that had 9 legs or something. He has this crazy horse, Odin does. And so his horse, his wolves, his ravens, and all his peeps, all his little warriors, flying through the night sky, searching and chasing and capturing the souls that had risen from the dead, that come out in the darkness. Mm-hmm. And so Odin is the first one to fly through the sky, be on his little chariot. But who knows if that's actually how Santa got his sled. Santa doesn't come for another 2,000 years, literally. So that's what's happening in the world, all right? So you've got these really dark places and really cold places. We're going to fast forward now, right? So it's Jesus is born and Christianity happens. And in Rome, for hundreds of years, they've been having a festival called Saturnalia. It was the god of Saturn, the god Saturn who was in charge of that, right? Growth, his planet is Saturn. It's also Saturday. And he was in charge of harvest, planting, growth, prosperity. And his holiday was from the middle of September to 2 or 3 weeks. And they partied big. It was a big, big party. Again, festivals, feasts about the coming harvest. Right? It's all agricultural. Everything was agricultural. They're praying and giving offerings, sacrificing, whatever they were doing, and partying big time for the harvest to come. So in the year 300, Constantine is the emperor at the time, and he's decided he's going to be Christian, but he doesn't care if they're still pagans. He's allowing the official religion of Rome is going to be Catholic, Catholicism or whatever they called it then. But you could still be pagan. You could still follow all your other gods, but which was really cool. But now, Jesus, we have to have something. We celebrate everybody's birthday and when everybody dies. So Jesus, this Jesus character, has to have a birthday. And so they decided, since they couldn't stop all these freaking festivals from happening, let's make his birthday, literally, they decide that his birthday is going to be the 25th. Because we have the solstice, we have Saturnalia. Well, let's throw Jesus' birthday in there too. And we're all partying all at the same time. And that's how his birthday came to be on the 25th. I am not Bible bashing, and I am not anti-Christian. But there are just some truth to the religion that we just don't all like to ingest. And that be one of them, is that lots of things are made up to work with getting the people out of the fields so that they would be Christian. And they just don't want to be. They really just, they fight it. And so that happens. He does some other interesting things, Constantine does, but he's accredited for Jesus' birthday. So around the same time that Constantine decides that that's all going to happen, St. Nicholas is born. He's a bishop. He's born around the end of 280, I think is his birth date, the year 280. And he dies I have it written here. He dies on December 6th in 343. Now, he's done all kinds of miracles in his little life, right? He's the giver. He was a very, very wealthy human who got orphaned, sent to the monkhood, wherever, and and is very, very wealthy. His wealthy parents donated all this money, so he starts becoming a good Samaritan, and he's now, pastor or priest, and they finally make him a bishop. But his big thing is, I'm just giving. I'm giving you all this money, I'm giving you things. He's very, very, very generous with all his money. And I suppose there's miracles that happen in there too. Funny miracles. They're funny. He gets it, whatever. So he does miracles. So he dies, but that legend of him doesn't ever die. Hundreds and hundreds of years later, nuns are still giving out candies, giving out things on his death date, which was the 6th. So, again, it's the Protestants, when they want to change, it's all about religion. The Protestants want to do the Reformation, and they want no saints. And they want, because there's only one you should be worshiping, which would be God. And so saints now cannot be worshipped. They freak out because they can't get rid of the St. Nicholas guy. No one's willing. No one's willing to give up the December festivals. They're like, no. And so the nuns are still sneaking candy into little kids' shoes and stuff. So St. Nicholas is really making a stand. So we're going to pagans are still doing their thing. But what starts to happen is that life begins to become very, very hard. So we're fast forwarding, things just progress and stories start to come out. But things really change during the 1700s. So now that's 1700 years later. So it's 1,000 years later when the Industrial Revolution starts. And there's a clear line between working and not working. And life being hard, not being able to pay your bills, not being able to feed your family, get new clothes, things like that. And so St. Nicholas and Krampus start their little gig together. And every country has stories that include St. Nicholas. Like St. Nicholas, he's just across Europe. Everybody's like, woohoo, Mr. Nick. And then they have a character that goes with him that beats children. What's funny is that back then you could beat the shit out of your children. You whip them, you beat them, you tie them to trees, and you beat them with sticks. And so each country had one of these, good or bad. I mean, always had the good, but they balanced it with bad. And they were serious about the bad. Like, kids got beaten, and kids got whipped, and you got nothing. And then there were the good kids, and they got the candies. But the thing that really, well, as a parent, you know, if there's a way that you can scare your child into being good, nothing's changed in 1,000 years. We still want our kids to behave. And so that is how they did it, was the threat of the cohort of St. Nicholas is going to come. And so in most of Europe, in Germanic part of Europe, we've got Krampus. Krampus. Now, in our modern day look, he looks like the devil. He don't always look like that. And he looks a lot like Pan. Again, so around the same time, the Catholic Church is developing the character of the devil. And it's all about artwork, art and stories. And so as they develop the look of the devil, they create Krampus in his likeness. But before that, he was just a goat man, a furry goat man. Maybe he had some horns, again, like Pan, but he wasn't quite the devil. He didn't have the tongue like this until artwork really started to depict him because of Catholicism. But so Krampus and the chain, so you can see on the modern day Krampus, he's got a little chain. And that's because that's his tie, his binding to the devil. So even Krampus has been Christianized. All right, so but Krampus doesn't make it to the United States until just recently, right? We'll think about that in a minute. So he's very European. All this stuff is European. They live a different life than the Puritans that came to America, and they have a whole different story that happens here. So I'm not going to actually talk about that yet. Around the 1200s, 1200 to the 1100s, so he comes around 1100 in that time period. And around the same time, we've got other dark creatures, monsters, that start coming out of the wild. It's a way for the culture to express their wildness and their darkness. Is there a chair over there, Or are you shopping?
I'm here for the stores.
Oh, Shay, will you grab him a chair, love? Is Shay down there? I didn't hear an answer. I'm sorry. Okay. Good. I want to talk about wassailing. So I'm going to go back up before I talk about the other dark creatures. So wassailing also has been around for centuries and centuries. 1,000 years. Pre-Christian, they wassailed. And wassels means, the word in English means to your health. But what they were doing, there were bands of pagans, of course, good old pagans, and it was about singing in the orchards. Thank you, Shay. Singing in the orchards and scaring out the bad spirits, but calling and singing in a healthy harvest for the spring. It's all about agriculture. And so these little bands of people would go from orchard to orchard. They would be fed, they would get drinks, and they would bring pots and pans and all kinds of loud things, and they would make all kinds of noise. They'd climb the trees and yell from the tops of the trees. It was a very fun and wild experience. But the wildness was to scare away the evil spirits. Like they had a job. And that was their job. So for hundreds of years, that happens. But then again, as agriculture shifts and Catholicism shifts, wassailing becomes something that happens that the poor do, and they hope that you're going to give them food and drink. And then during the Industrial Revolution, when there were, again, that separation and people were angry, it became violent. And so you didn't actually let the wassailers in. And so things started changing. But that's how it starts. It started as a way to bring in the good spirits and chase out the bad spirits. And there were other characters that started coming around door to door, especially in England. They had these lots of door to door, and I'm going to chat about those. Back to the Nordic people. Again, around the same time, 1100, 1200, they started having monsters, and there were a bunch of them. They had the Tomta, the Tomten. Tomten is the group of little gnomes, and one of them is a Tomta. They were little elves, and there was lots of them. They're from Iceland, and they would come down from the mountains. The Tomta did, and they were little creatures who monitored your behavior, and they would help you. They were happy to help you with your chores, but they also were happy to whip you. So if you were lazy or you were goofing off, they beat you. Everyone had a beating stick. And so they hit you with sticks to slap you back out of your laziness, to get you motivated. Those were the Tomten. All right? And then they had a solstice goat. The goat ate you if you weren't good. I don't know. They also had the solstice cat, but she's part of a fun little group here in Iceland. Now, and that Iceland really is the darkest, wildest of the countries. And they also didn't want their children wandering because there are beasts. Literally, there's creatures that will eat your children in the woods, and they all lived right there by the woods. So some of these stories were to scare children not to wander far from home, right? And that goes through all story tales, through all of Europe. Like, they just want you to stay close to home because wicked things live in the woods. So, in Iceland, during the winter months, there was Grilla. She was the ogress witch. And she lived in a cave, and she hunted children. So you didn't want to go out at night because Grilla was going to get you. Now, Grilla had 13 boys that they called the Yule lads. Now, the Yule lads, they came to your house all 13 of them arrived at your house, one each night for 13 nights. And then each of the little fuckers stayed for 2 weeks. And they had their own sort of mischief. Some of them, bothered your herds. Some bothered your fields. Some bothered the hay. Each of them had a funny little piece of harassment they did to you. And so you had to always be on your best behavior because you don't want the Yule lads to mess your space up. So they were the Yule lads. They were her children. And then she had a familiar. She had a cat familiar called the Yule cat. And the Yule cat was, if you didn't have new clothes on Yule Day at the festivals, at the holidays, she ate you. So there was a real drive to have new clothes, to have new woven things. So again, back to the economy that was happening there. And that's one of the first things that I noted was the Yule cat. You need to have something new. And that's the first part of the story that actually begins to be commercial. Is that, well, in that days it wasn't really commercial, but they wanted you to buy something or make something. You needed to have something new. Because Christmas didn't look anything like what we know now until the last 50 or 60 years, really. Prior to our lives, it was very different. Even our parents' lives, some of, your parents, they didn't have Christmas like we had. It was different. So, all right, so that's happening in Iceland. In Wales, there was Matty Laud. Matty Laud was a person. Well, it was a person. We know it was a person. I'm not going to pretend it was a real horse. She's a horse, and it's a white sheet and a horse's skull, and she went door to door. And her job was to do mischief, but she was coming from the underworld. She was being reborn. And you needed to feed her. You brought her in, you fed her and drank her, and then mischief could happen, but you didn't know. So you had to decide, right? Did you feel safe enough to let her in? Because it was bad luck if you didn't let her in. So you had to weigh that out. And again, as time became more violent and more angst, you didn't let her in more and more. So it's a funny tradition because people started to become frustrated and angry And so that was a way that they were letting it out, through costume and through play in this way, right? All right. So Krampus, he's coming around in the 12th century. He was in the Germanic countries, but in France, there was Pierre Fouettard. He was also a Krampus. He would go with St. Nicholas. And it was the eve, so St. Nicholas traveled the eve of his death, which was the 5th. And that's when you got your beating from Krampus or from Pierre. And then the next morning, if you didn't get a beating, you got treats. You got one or the other. But you didn't get your treats on the 5th. You got your beating. And he very much looks like Pan, right? Pan and the devil. And when you think about modern day, he's the Grinch.
Yeah.
Totally the Grinch. That's our representation of the bad guy of Christmas, is the Grinch. And so Dr. Seuss had to have known the stories of Krampus. And Dr. Seuss comes out like in the 40s, 1947 or something like that. It was a long time ago. And Krampus hadn't made its way because, I'm going to tell you about that now. Am I going to tell you about that? No, I'm going to still tell you about bad guys. I'm going to tell you about Belznickel. Belznickel, he's in the 1600s, again in Germany, and he's about beating and goodies. If you were bad, you got beaten. Like with a thicket thing. And if you weren't, you got goodies. And that was 2 weeks before Yule. So, and then of course there's La Befana. La Befana was the Italian witch. She was a strega. And just like Krampus, she came on the eve of the Epiphany. So she's almost like, she's 12th night. And what I love, and I wish we had Befana here in this country, because she would leave you goodies, and then she would clean your effing house. She would clean your house, and then she would carry on. Mothers loved her. She was a good witch. So then we have her. The Italians loved, of course they love Befana very, very much. And long after Christianity has taken over Italy, they cannot rid their culture of Befana. And so the Catholics are so good at this, love them. They decided that the 3 wise men stopped at Befana's house on the way to visit Jesus and wanted to know if she knew how to find the Savior in Bethlehem. And she's like, oh, freaking have no idea what you're talking about. And they were like, but you can come on in, I'll feed you, I'll give you a drink. They spent the night at her house, and the next morning they said, well, we're going to carry on. Do you want to come with us? And she said, no, I got too much to do. I'm here. This is where I can't go with you guys, or who the heck? No. Well, she regrets that. And when off they go, and the next day, she went out searching for them. And the Christian version is she's still searching for them now. But as women, we know that ain't true. That didn't happen, because they got lost a billion times. But that's how they Christianized her, is that she was such an integral part of their life. They were unwilling to give her up. And that's true with all the pagan people, all of the pagan deities. All the Christian holidays are around an earth-based holiday that had been being celebrated for thousands of years, and then no one's willing to give it up because it was so meaningful. So they've Christianized them all. And so you just have to look not far beneath the surface to see where the earth and the fabulous cosmos that we live in are created in that time. And before La Befana, there was a Roman goddess, and she was honored around New Year's, and her name was Strenia. I want to say Strenia. So there was even someone before her that would come and visit you. I don't think she cleaned your house, but she was coming around New Year's time. All right, so it's all just an evolution of characters. So I can't wait to talk to you. I made notes about how to do this in order and shit. I didn't follow any of it. I'm going to come back to the mushroom, but I'm going to move on to Santa now. So when the Puritans came to this country, they didn't bring any of the dark stories with them. In Europe, they were still very, very vibrant. And Father Christmas, Father Yule, and Saint Nicholas all are very different characters all across Europe. Here in the United States, they're all one human. Right? They're all this fat man with the red suit. So the Industrial Revolution starts in 1760 in Europe. And things are hard. And by the 1800s, the stories in Europe of the dark characters are very, very prevalent. They don't allow any of them to come here because they're the Puritans and they don't want that. They want a very clean Christian thing. And so no stories came at all. And they wanted a good guy. Only wanted a good guy. So around the early 1800s, so we've got the St. Nick character, right? Stories start to get written. And the first story that gets written is in 1825, The Visit from St. Nick. And we all know that story. And that is the beginning of who Santa Claus becomes. And even in that story, doesn't he ride in a sled in that story? That's the first time. So this person, Moore was his name, right? He creates what becomes the personification of Santa. And it all happens in New York, which is interesting. Before he gets to the North Pole, he's all about New York. So that story gets written in New York. And then there's a poem written also, all right? That was all happening. So there's this character that's beginning to have life. He's not in a red suit yet, but he's starting. And so then this gets commissioned, and you do a picture of Santa, and what do you think Santa is? And it's getting closer. By 1863, he's already beard, big, red. 1931. Who knows what happened in 1931? Anybody know?
Cool.
Yes. Coca-Cola. It's the Depression. It's Prohibition. And Coca-Cola decides this is our time. And they create the Santa. They make a poster of the very first Santa. He's holding the Coke. And it's like, grab your Coke, because that's all you can fucking drink anyway. Because it's Prohibition. So he begins it. So 1931 is the Coke poster that begins the Santa era. And we have been downhill ever since. On 1941, 10 years later, I don't know who is in office at the time, but Thanksgiving. So what's happening already is that people are starting to buy gifts for the Christmas holiday. Because now Christmas has already happened. We already know that Jesus, his birthday is going to be the 25th, and there's a gift, right? So they're starting. Hundreds of years ago, it was figs and fruit and good things. So this becomes the commercialized Christmas after World War II. We need boosts in economies, and that's how it starts. They make the decision that we're going to now commercialize Christmas and make it a retail holiday. Right after this, right after World War I and World War II.
710, and Katrina says FDR.
Oh, thank you. FDR, right. I thought it might have been him. And I'm almost finished. Is anybody ready to be done? Can I keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. So, 1941, FDR declares so that you have enough time to shop. And that is what it is about. That the Thanksgiving would always be the fourth Thursday, so you had enough time to shop. It's the only reason. It's the only reason that it happened. And it was just about doing our economy a boost. And I have to say, owning a retail shop, I'm happy for that boost. And it's something that I have to live with all the time because I'm also not that human. Like, I'm not about gift giving and doing crazy things. My son, we're not well off when he was younger. He learned how to have a meager Christmas, and we did really well. We made gifts. So I'm of a different mindset. So to be pushing retail is always hard for me. And, it is what we live in, right? So that's how the Santa came about. Now, there are some very fun stories about mushrooms I can't wait to tell you about. Let me make sure that's all I want to say. Yeah, it's about no bad guys. So let's go back to Krampus. So none of these stories make it here because we're all goody two-shoes with only good on this side of the pond. But they never leave there. Something happens. Somebody gets a hold of him, but it's not until around 2000. He's only been a character in our United States lives for about 20 years. Somebody gets a hold of him and they start doing fun things and he just becomes a character, but he becomes part of pop culture, not part of actually the holiday. But it's about, there's festivals, Krampus festivals, and all kinds of things that started happening, and it became a very art-oriented. Who can make the best Krampus masks and things like that. It's really interesting to research about it and see the artwork that's been done and things like that, but that's how it started here. Because I can remember young kids talking about it a couple of years ago, not a couple of years, maybe 10 years ago, and I was like, who the heck is Krampus? Like, I was really out of the loop. But I have to give myself some space because we just didn't have that. Also, this is real coal that Benita gave me. So if you've not seen real coal, come touch it. It's fun. It won't mean you'll get any under your tree. It's fun to look at. So some of the stories about flying reindeers and flying shaman start with this fabulous mushroom. It is this mushroom. Let's get up close. It's that red and white magic mushroom. I'll pass this around. This is my daughter-in-law made this sticker for the Christmas holidays. She's a total mushroom geek. And so this mushroom is called Amanita muscaria. Amanita muscaria. It is incredibly toxic, but no one's died from ingesting it. There has not been one listed case of someone dying from it. You trip your brains out, but you're not dying. And so it is so hallucinogenic that you can't actually really eat it right from the plant. And so this is a funny story, but it's true, that the shaman noticed that the reindeer loved these mushrooms. The funny thing about this mushroom is that they grow near birch trees, and they actually have a isn't it so cute? Yeah. Have a symbiotic relationship with the birch trees where they nurture the roots of the birch trees. So it's an amazing plant. But the reindeers love it. And they trip. The reindeers are literally flying. Like, they do funny things. They have funny gaits, right? So they're la 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 through the woods because they're tripping. But the reindeer, it didn't hurt them, right? It didn't affect them, and so they would pee it out, and then the shaman would actually drink the urine because they had processed the mushroom well enough that they could ingest it and not like be near death. So they could actually use it. And so then they would be tripping too. So everyone was tripping with these mushrooms. And so the red and white, all the old images before the Santa, like all the elves, all the images were red and white. Now, why would they pick red and white if it wasn't about the mushroom? What else is red and white in nature? Not a lot of things. And it's such a distinct mushroom. So this is all happening in Siberia, by the way. But you can find this mushroom all over. It grows in the United States. It grows all over. And they get really, really big. Fairies live under them. There's so much lore because they're such a unique toadstool. So fairies and the fae, the reindeers and Santa and the shamans all partook of this sacred mushroom. And that's why we have flying reindeer. That's my story. And there's lots of people out there that contradict that and say, no, that never happened. Funny story that they said, Siberia didn't have reindeer. Shaman in Siberia didn't worship reindeer, which is crazy. Of course they had spirit animal reindeers. They didn't eat the mushroom. Why wouldn't they? So there's funny contradiction out there, but I stand to it that is the story. It just makes perfect sense to my little brain, and I love it. I love the story. And you see it in all the things, so it just makes sense. Yeah, so that's what I got for you tonight, along with some hot mulled cider at the bottom of the staircase. Any questions?
Well, Lorraine had said that in Rhinebeck they do an event called the Sinterklaas, and that
Right.
the Krampus is there.
The Krampus is there, of course.
Yeah.
So Sinterklaas is a very isolated event in somewhere in the Germanic world where they do a Sinterklaas. But it's very new. It's not an old tradition. It's a more newer tradition. And Rhinebeck does a good Sinterklaas event where they have all kinds of stuff. Have you gotten, Bridget, have you gone up to Sinterklaas?
I have, yes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
It's great.
It makes me think of you and the things you want to do, right?
And then Serpent and Bone, right? They have
They have a live Krampus. You can go sit on his lap and get your picture taken. Right? That happens. When does that happen? That's the night
up
market. And it is coming up soon. It might be the 8th. It's a Friday night. Look that up if you're interested. It's a night market. It's a dark market. It runs from 7 to midnight, and it's unique artwork that's on the dark side.
Where is that?
at Locust Grove.
It'll be at Locust Grove this year. So they do it at 4 spokes of the year, this dark market. And it's all handcrafts, or mostly handcrafts. It's really cool. We're going to be doing solstice here in the store on the solstice on the 21st. We're going to do it. The store will be open for shopping until 8 o'clock. But at 6:30, I'm going to do a small little ritual. We'll do singing bowls and some singing, and we'll do it over here because there's a silver spiral underneath the carpet. You can see a photo of it before we put the carpet down. So we'll actually do it right in this ritual space, and we'll do a little candle lighting ceremony. It'll be 10 minutes or so, and everyone is welcome to join for that. Yeah. I have 10 minutes. All right. What?
I said if anyone has questions.
Oh, yeah. All right. Anybody else? Anything to add? Did I forget any creatures? Any dark creatures? I think I got most of them. There are others. Like I said, each country had their own names for the things, but this is the general thing. And again, it's all about parenting. Keeping our kids in line however we need to with a whip or not. So it's fun. All right. All right, I'm gonna click you guys. Oh, no clapping. Thank you for tuning in.